Hello, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending where you are in the world. Thank you for joining this webinar on project prioritization. My name's Stuart Easton. I'm one of the founders here at Transparent Choice, and I always love doing these webinars. It's always a chance for me to kind of share the excitement and share the work that we've put in over the last few years to build something that's that we think is really terribly important and has big impact. So thank you for joining. There are still one or two people dribbling in, but we're going to get started and basically to say thank you to those who turned up on time. Thank you. What we're going to talk about today is project prioritization. And in the invitation, there was a rough agenda, which looks a bit like this. We're going to look at why projects matter. We're going to look at the best ways to align projects with strategy and how to balance project load and resources and all the other stuff you can read here. But before we do that, I just want to kind of say at a personal level why I think this is really important. Projects represent not just the strategic intent of your business, but they also represent the lives of the people who are implementing those projects. And so I think we all have a duty to make sure that we're picking projects that are worthwhile, right? So that when people invest their lives in delivering these projects, they're delivering something that's worthwhile. I think that's not just important from a business point of view, but from a human satisfaction point of view. Everybody wants to deliver work that is meaningful. And if we can help people do that more often, then that's a wonderful thing. And that's what really energizes us here over at Transparent Choice. So one quick housekeeping thing. There is a Q&A facility. So if you have any questions, just click on the button and type them in. We'll answer them at the end, if that's okay. One of my colleagues may, in fact, answer some of them as we go, but I'll take a look at them, or we'll take a look at them at the end. So let's go. We're going to try and get this done in around about 20 minutes, 25 minutes maybe, plus or minus some questions. So it may take us around to about half an hour with the questions. So it's scary statistic time. Let's dive on in. These numbers come from the PMI, the Project Management Institute, and they do big surveys of the project management industry every year, and this one was kind of scary. So what they said is that 20% of projects should be stopped immediately. This isn't just projects that aren't really well aligned. These are projects that are actually destroying value rather than projects that are adding value. 20% of projects are waste, and that's a huge number. And that gets a little bit more scary when you look at the next statistic from the PMI, which is that half of projects are not resourced properly. So here we are, we've got 20% of your projects are waste, and half of them are not resourced properly. We're doing something wrong here. And this 0.5% that's not half of projects that aren't well aligned, aren't resourced properly, tend to be the projects that get into trouble. So if we imagine plotting all our projects on this chart, this axis is all about how good a strategic fit, how much value are your projects adding, and the other one is how well is your project going. And most portfolios we come across have got projects dotted all over the map here. Okay, and this is kind of a real challenge, because if we think about it, the projects at the bottom here, if my mouse will respond, yeah, here we go. Whoops, too far. The projects at the bottom here are waste, right? They're projects that we shouldn't be doing. They're not supporting the goals of the organization. And so, some people will just say, oh, well, they're not aligned. But no, let's put a proper name on it. They are waste. We shouldn't be doing them. And if we just stopped, and at the same time, you've got these projects in the top left. These are projects that are important. They are adding strategic value, but they're not progressing the way they should be, right? So they're at risk of outright failure or missing some of their goals or overrunning or whatever it may be. And so if we could just find a way of identifying which projects are waste and then take the resources from those projects and put them into those important, those strategic projects, then we'd actually be able to turn those projects around and make them successful, right? So that's really answering the question of why prioritization is important. And there are lots of reasons why organizations have projects that maybe don't add as much value as they can. You know, and we've all come across pet projects, and we've come across political decisions and decisions that are, you know, projects that are just driven by momentum. You know, projects that tend to get a little bit of a life of their own, and they can be kind of hard to kill. And what project prioritization does, when you do it right, is it gives you a way to get everybody onto the same page about what's important, which ones we should invest in and which ones we should not invest in, or perhaps we should invest a little less in. Now, the strategic alignment thing really does matter. It has a huge impact on the success rate or otherwise of projects. You can flip this the other way around. It has a big impact on the failure rate of projects. But projects that are well aligned with strategy are far more likely to achieve their business goals, to finish on time and finish on budget than projects that aren't. And this is true no matter whether you're looking at IT projects or huge capital projects and infrastructure projects. If they're aligned with the goals of the organization, they'll tend to get the support they need from the executives, they tend to get the resources they need, and they can be more successful. But you have to be able to identify those strategic projects for this to work. So this all comes down to, can we measure strategic value, right? What does aligned with our strategic goals actually mean? How can I measure it? Well, here's the big problem. If you go into a room with 6 executives, well, let's pick each executive on a Monday, and we'll ask each of them in turn what strategic alignment means. What are the big goals that they have, and the big drivers, so that we can think about measuring strategic alignment. So we'll ask those 6 executives that question on Monday, and then we'll ask them it again on Thursday. And I bet you we get at least 12 answers to that question. And the reason for this is that humans are really bad at this kind of thing, this kind of decision making, where we have lots of variables, lots of biases pushes around. What did we have for breakfast? What did we hear on the news this morning? That customer that shouted at me yesterday, that's going to change my perspective, and it's going to bias what I tell you today. So we need a process that will help get all your stakeholders aligned on what's important, and do so in a way that eliminates a lot of that bias in the decision making. And a lot of those pet projects, they sneak in there because one particular executive, who's usually quite powerful, has a particular bias in a particular direction. That's all it is. It's all about decision bias. So we need a way of eliminating a lot of that decision bias and giving your stakeholders a way of controlling the definition and agreeing across the stakeholder group what's most important, and doing that in a nice, transparent way. So believe it or not, this is an area that academic researchers have looked into for several decades now, this area of project prioritization. And back in the middle of 2017, somewhere around about there, the University of New South Wales actually pulled together all that research into all these different methods for doing project prioritization. And they wanted to ask the question, which ones work? Which ones are the most suitable for doing project prioritization? And so they looked at over 100 different methodologies. So this is everything from just, beauty contests where people pitch their ideas, through, scoring spreadsheets, and then some more interesting and creative ways of doing prioritization. So some people will give everybody $100 to spend, and you go and spend it, those kind of things. So they looked at all those different methods, and they came to the really shocking conclusion that actually there are only really 2 methods that are suitable for doing project prioritization. One is called DEA, and the other is called AHP, which stands for Analytic Hierarchy Process. Don't worry about that. There's no test at the end of this, and we can go and look up what AHP is later on. But AHP is the method that we use in transparent choice, and we use it because it works and because it's a pretty user-friendly way of doing it. So if you're using spreadsheets right now to prioritize projects, you're probably letting some of that waste through, right? You're probably not very far from the average portfolio, and the average portfolio has 20% of projects. It's not just projects that aren't well aligned, it's projects that should be stopped tomorrow, right? That was what the PMI was talking about. And that's a huge number. So best practice is AHP. And there's no real debate about that any longer. The research has kind of come to that. Now, executives don't care about whether it's AHP or ABC or XYZ. They just want to have the information that they need to make decisions. And what AHP lets you do, what transparent choice lets you do, is define value, define what's important to this organization. So, for example, I've spotted some of the people on this webinar. So if you're thinking about flood defenses, for example, for a city or a state, you're going to have a definition of value, which is about, you know, how many properties can you protect, and is it going to protect them for, you know, a 10-year storm or a 100-year storm, right? Those kind of things. Those are going to be what drives your value score. If you're doing IT projects, it might be, is this project going to help us grow revenue? Is it going to help us reduce cost? And so on and so forth. And what transparent choice and AHP lets you do is build real consensus around what that definition of value means, which means that when you put it into a dashboard like this, your executive team, your stakeholders really trust those numbers and can use them to make good decisions. And if you happen to be a government body, a public body, and there's quite a few of you on this call today, I noticed, you do it in a way that's transparent and auditable, and you can prove that you've got a good methodology for defining what the most valuable projects are. And that can be an absolute godsend. So we've got this definition of value, and if we combine that with cost, we can identify the high value for money projects, and we can identify the low value for money projects. And what the executives want is this kind of really good information that tells them which projects are most important. But they also need to know, you know, how are we doing against budget? Have we exceeded our budget or not? They often want to know, do we have the capacity to deliver projects? We often find customers where when they come to us, they have 20, 30% too many projects on the go at a time. And that really destroys your productivity, and it really destroys your project success rates. And then there may be KPIs and things like that you want to track as well, whether or not you're likely to hit those goals. And very often you'll see this kind of dashboard in a PPM tool, and you'll see somebody putting this kind of thing together in spreadsheets or whatever it may be, this kind of dashboard. And the problem with that is, you know, that what they've really done is taken, you know, some criteria and they've evaluated the projects against those criteria. But because they've not used a robust methodology for defining those criteria and for getting everybody, the whole executive team, to agree to that, it means that when they see the numbers, they don't really trust them and they don't buy into it. So the journey matters. It's the way you do it that adds the value. It's not actually the numbers, believe it or not. So let's go and look at this in some software. And this is going to be a fairly quick demo. And anybody that would like a deeper dive, I'm more than happy to do that one-on-one after the event. Just reach out to me. Contact details will be at the end. So this is the dashboard, right? This is what everybody wants at the end of the process. And what we're going to do is we're going to look very quickly at how we got there. And so the first piece that we're going to do is we're going to define the criteria we're going to use to evaluate projects. So these are really the business drivers, and it's really important that your senior stakeholders own this. right? That they really buy into this. And it's very simple to create a list of criteria. And you can see that criteria can be hierarchical. So risk in this case is made up of a couple of kinds of complexity and then inherent technology risk. And this allows you very quickly to brainstorm and come up with a short list of the criteria that really matter. And then what we do is we need to weight those criteria. Not all those criteria are equally important. And this is the AHP piece. This is the decision science piece that's helping to eliminate bias. Because what we do is we bring the executives, your stakeholders together in a meeting excuse me one second, let me just refresh that, it's been open for a while. We bring the stakeholders together in a meeting and we ask them a really simple question. Is criterion A or criterion B more important, right? And by how much? So if I say criteria B is more important, customer satisfaction, it then says, well, how much more important? Is it a little bit or a lot more important? And the crucial thing is that we're doing this as a team. So you'll see as I'm on the left, this is the meeting facilitator. On the right is one of your stakeholders. And as I progress through here, these guys follow on, and they can be on their smartphones or on a tablet or whatever device they're on. And as they're voting, you can see the votes changing in real time down at the bottom, okay? And what we're looking for is where there's agreement, like there is here between these two, and where there's disagreement. And it's this discussion, you have a discussion around this that really adds the value. This is where your stakeholders start to learn about each other, and they really start to listen to each other and to build an agreement about which of these business goals really is more important to the whole organization. All right, and this is where you get people out of the stovepipes and thinking big picture and thinking together. And so you go through that process and answer all the questions, the different combinations of criteria, and you end up with a screen that shows you the weighting for those different criteria. And this can be a really powerful tool to communicate with the organization what your strategic goals are. Very often, this is one of the most transformative things that our customers go through when they roll this out to the organization. People go, oh, so that's why we're making these decisions. Seems kind of trivial, but there you go. Now, this is all very good. We've now got a model that we can use to score projects, to measure how valuable projects are, but we need to get some projects into the pipeline. So one of the things that we can do is create very quickly, a matter of minutes, create a project request form where people can come along and they can can start filling in the form and get all those project requests and those ideas into the system without spreadsheets, without people emailing you. Just get them in straight in at source online. And then those projects fall into a Kanban. And this is a really good tool, really invaluable for PMO leaders, actually, because what it does is it helps automate a lot of the process of evaluating and documenting your project requests. When they come in, there's usually not a lot of information there. And so what you can do is you can define steps, stage gates, if you like, evaluation steps, where you might do an initial validation, you might do a risk assessment, you might do initial project sizing, you might do creating specific risk steps, things, whatever it is that you do to evaluate your projects, you build in as a set of steps and within this Kanban structure. And at each step in that Kanban, the software can send out emails automatically to people to collect data. So let's say you get to the risk assessment step, the system will send out an email to your senior project manager to do a quick risk assessment. And those projects then are being tracked within Transparent Choice automatically. All the data is being tracked, and you're building a really strong audit trail of who's changed what and when. And there's one of those emails that went out automatically. This link will take them to a form where they can fill in a risk assessment, for example. And this audit trail can be really important, especially if you're in a public body, a government body, where you need to be able to justify the decisions that you've made and show that nobody's being, playing around with the numbers and so on. You can also do things like tracking the dependencies and so on and so forth. Now, most PMOs that we come to are doing this in spreadsheets and email and all this kind of good stuff. So doing it online like this basically makes the PMO leader's job an awful lot easier, saves a load of time, and improves the quality of the data, because there's no copying and pasting and all that kind of stuff. So there's no room for data to be out of date, or there's no room for people to miskey it when you're moving it from a spreadsheet into another spreadsheet. And just as importantly for the PMO leader, instead of staying up late at night preparing all those charts the night before the big meeting, the big prioritization meeting, and we've all done it, instead of staying up till midnight, all you have to do is kind of click on a button and ta-da, all your data's there, right? So there you go, you've got that night back to go and do something fun with your family. So this is where we started. So what are we looking at? So as I said earlier, we've got value. How valuable, how attractive is each project on this axis? The cost, so high value for money, low value for money. Now, in this particular example, I've set this chart up, and these are all editable. You can add to them and change them and add new reports and all that kind of good stuff very quickly. So I've set this one up so that circles represent projects that are approved. Squares are ones that haven't been approved yet or rejected yet, and crosses are ones that have been rejected. So if good value for money lives up here and bad value for money lives down there, why do we have a circle down here, right? Why do we have a project that's been approved down here? That smells a little bit like a pet project to me. So let's keep going. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But first of all, let's just see what information we've got. So we've got value for money. So this is no longer a matter of opinion. It's no longer a matter of politics. It's a matter of fact, right? We can present this as fact, and the executives created this value model, so they believe it, they trust it. But at the same time, as we're selecting our portfolio, we can track budget, we can track any KPIs that you want, and we can track resource constraints. In this case, it's pretty simple in this silly demo. It's just person days, but you might have several different resource pools that you need to draw from. And then at the same time, we can look at the portfolio broken out along different dimensions, if you like, because a portfolio where all the projects are in one place is probably not a good portfolio. So for example, in this case, we might ask the question, does this CF team, should they actually have a project or two, right? Why is it that they don't have any projects? Is that politically acceptable or not? Okay, so we want to be able to balance the portfolio. And it's not just balancing how many resources we've got, right? So are we trying to get our people to do too many projects, which is a disaster, right? Don't do that, resist that with all your might. But also, is it balanced across the organization? Now, I said we'd come back to this thing here, right? This pet project. So what I haven't told you that is that this particular company is going to go bust if they can't save $20 million, right? That's why we've got this hard savings KPI up here, big and visible. So what I can do then is I can create another chart where I'm plotting value against the hard savings. And what I can see is that this project that we were worried about being a pet project is actually there because it's delivering huge savings. And in fact, we should probably include this project as well to get us to that $20 million saving target. So let's add that one and see if it gets us there. And you'll see that this number's updated, but we've blown our project, our budget. So now we need to go back and think about, well, which of these other projects might we want to eliminate? And so you can iterate towards a portfolio that works for everyone. And that's really it. That's the key here, is that you're making better decisions, but crucially decisions that everybody supports. And when you do that, it really is a big win for all your stakeholders. So it's a win for the PMO, right? For everything from just moving things online and making life easier and getting better information for the execs and automated emails going out to update stakeholders, all that kind of good stuff. that's all fantastic. But for the executives, they're getting better information, they're getting agreement around strategic alignment, they can identify the projects that are waste, and ultimately get more projects completed on time and on budget and so on. And for the project resources, you know, again, moving things online makes things more transparent, so they know where they are. They can see why, you know, that strategic alignment thing tells them why their project is important. Right sizing the portfolio means that they're not overworked, right? So they can actually deliver projects and be successful, right? And everybody loves to be successful, and so on. And your stakeholders, project requesters, they're happy. They're going to be happy because they get automated updates on their projects and everything else. So, so there's a big win here for pretty much everyone in the value chain. And if you would like help building a business case, we can use these different areas of value to really construct a business case that's very strong, very compelling. And sometimes, you know, again, if you're in the public sector in particular, part of the business case is just about transparency and auditability, just making it visible and getting stakeholders in the wider community to be able to participate in the process. So the business case will vary depending on your organization, but it'll include all of these components in most likely. So that's about it for today. It's just a very quick session. So I want to thank you all for joining. And what I think we can do now is go across to the Q&A. So we've got one quick question, which is how do you identify resource bottlenecks? So if you remember on that screen, let's just go back up here. If you remember on this screen, we have resources up here, and actually you can have multiple buckets of resources, right? Multiple resource pools. So if it's an IT portfolio, for example, you might have system architects or solution architects, and you might have DBAs. They're often people who are in short supply. So you might be tracking these independently. And as you're selecting your projects, you can see here, this number would turn red if you've exceeded your capacity to deliver. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how you would identify bottlenecks and figure out so I'm just reading the next questions. Figure out how to solve them. Right, I'm just reading through a couple of questions. Let's pick one of these. Okay, so one of them says, I work in the defense sector. Is this a hosted system or on-premise? And the answer to that is it can be either. Generally, we like our customers to use the hosted system. And the reason for that is that we're always updating it and improving it based on customer feedback. So if you're on the hosted system, you always have the latest and the greatest. But we do have customers that have our software on premise behind their firewall in their data center, so the data is secure. So another question is, do we offer any consulting services? So Transparent Choice does not offer consulting ourselves, but we do have consulting partners around the world in many sort of consulting sectors, from construction and infrastructure to procurement to all kinds of things. So there's lots of different places where you can get support if you need it. But frankly, the software is pretty easy to use, and there are great tutorials online and all that kind of good stuff. Another quick question: how different is this software from existing PPM tools? And this is probably going to be the last question we have time for. So traditional PPM tools are really built around managing the tasks of a project and around doing sort of project reporting. You know, how's the project progressing? How's it progressing against budget and so on? And most of them don't have very good prioritization tools at all. And those that do don't have tools that are based on AHP. And that journey, that bit where the executives are doing that, A versus B comparison, actually adds loads of value. Very often what we hear is something, comments along the lines of, gee, that's the first time our executive team has ever been on the same page, right? And we get emails saying things like, the executive team really loved that meeting when we did that. It really added value for them. And that's the biggest difference. So ultimately it comes down to AHP really works when you're picking portfolios. And if it's not based on AHP, and I can only think of one PPM tool that's kind of got a little bit of AHP in there. If it's not based on AHP, then it really isn't best practice, and you're going to get some of those waste projects in there. And that can be millions of dollars worth of waste that you're generating. So that's it. That's probably all we have time for. Obviously, this was a really, really short session, a really, really short demo. It's really no more than a taster. If you'd like to figure out more and how it might be applied in your environment, drop me an email or go to our website and request a demo, and we'll set one up. We'll get somebody on with you. Whether or not it's me, we'll wait and see, but we'll get somebody to sit through, find out a little bit more about your environment, and then explore how we might fit in and add value. It's not just about software, it's about people and culture and all those things as well. So thank you very much for taking half an hour out of your busy day. And I hope to talk to some of you again very soon.